Welcome to another edition of the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology, our once a fortnight visit to the weather pub where we sit around the bar and chat all things weather nerd and weather nerdy. Thank you so much for joining me yet again, Chief Meteorologist Richard Luterman and Chief Meteorologist Emily Wahls. Of course, for those listening and watching, my name is Chief Meteorologist Rob Haswell. It has been a very interesting couple of weeks since we last talked. I almost feel like we should have the Isobar on more frequently because every time we take a gap, massive weather events occur. So let's get to the most recent, obviously a significant snowstorm over a significant holiday, right? The timing couldn't have been worse over the Thanksgiving weekend for us. We survived it, but it was rough.
Yeah, down in Chicago, we got hit pretty hard with that one. Just cancellations alone, not even considering delays out of our airports. The two major airports that we have in the area, O'Hare and Midway, we had over 1,400 cancellations on Saturday alone. That ended up stretching into Sunday. And then on Monday, we had even more flights delayed and canceled because we had an additional little snowstorm that came through. But the weekend one, that's really what got us. So we had about 7 to 11 inches across a large portion of the region, a little bit less in parts of Northwest Indiana, where we saw about 6 to 8 inches in total. But regardless, this was the biggest snowstorm that we've had in a long time. In fact, on Saturday alone, we actually recorded 8.4 inches of snow at O'Hare, which in a single day, this is going down in history as the snowiest November day that Chicago has on record that we've ever seen. So it was very significant for us. But boy, the delays and the travel impacts that we had, that was a big whammy for Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, and then just up the road here, pretty much the same story. Obviously, some huge travel impacts on a big, busy travel weekend. We had a record amount of snow. We had, the upper end of it was 12 to 14 inches. We got over 6 inches worth of snow officially at Mitchell International, causing all kinds of domino effects right across the area. And, this was just a couple of weeks past the big lake effect event that slammed into counties south of Milwaukee. We're seeing Kenosha area seeing 14 inches worth of snow. So they had just melted from under that to then get hit with this again through the Thanksgiving weekend. How are things over in Detroit, Rich?
Rob and Emily, we got a fair amount over the weekend. We had about 3.6 at Metro Airport. So that's the official, National Weather Service site. But there were a lot of 3 to 5s in Detroit, Saturday into Sunday morning. At my house, I got about 4. But there were some spots near Saginaw, out there around Hamburg and Pinckney. This is to the west side of Detroit that picked up close to 7. So most areas 3 to 5, a few areas higher. Downriver, which is very close to Lake Erie, they actually got less because the Lake Erie influence sometimes can actually bring a little warming effect to that part of Michigan. So there was like an inch downriver Michigan, south of Detroit. So another interesting storm. It's the holiday season, gets everyone in the mood, I guess. And, we didn't get any records. I know Emily and Rob, you've had, record snowfall, in a sense over these last couple of weeks. Nothing like that. However, in those lake effect areas, of northern Michigan, they got creamed, some places 18 inches, 24 inches, it's those typical snowbelt regions. The ski country near Traverse City got a lot of snow over. So that's good over the weekend. So they'll be working, and now it's the holiday season. So ski season has started here in Michigan.
Yeah, there you go. Obviously, the ski hills are pretty happy about it. I would say locally here, a little ski hill, a little Switzerland, definitely had a great weekend, although they did have an issue with their ski lift, but I won't drag them into that one again. But it's interesting that you bring up the lake, and I think I want to circle back to that, Rich, but Emily, I kind of cut you off there. What were you saying?
I was just going to jump in and say, the overall vibe in Chicago after this last snowstorm, I think was a pretty good one because last winter was such a dud for people that love winter. We only saw 11.9 inches in total last winter season. And for us to just pick up, 8.7 at O'Hare, but other locations around 11 or 12 inches, some locations actually outdid what they saw in total the entire winter last year. So a lot of, snow removal businesses and businesses that rely on winter weather, are thrilled about the snowfall that we've just had.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because there were a lot of folks, that do that for a living. A lot of landscapers that's their, winter side hustle, if you will. It's what keeps the lights on for them. And last couple of winters has been really tough. But getting back to what Rich was pointing out with the lake, it's fascinating how the Great Lakes impact winter storms. We were joking around today on the air that, when someone asked the question, oh, does the Lake Michigan give us more snow or less snow? The answer is yes. Because, it can give us a foot or more of snow, like the lake effect event we had, but it also undercut some of our totals in this recent system, because in certain areas, it added a little warmth and moisture and brought those snow ratios down. So we ended up with lower amounts right by the lake and bigger amounts just a couple of miles farther in. So Rich, yeah, the lake that we live by here, Michigan, the lakes that you live by on the other side of Michigan, just a huge part of winter forecasting.
And for people who, move to the Great Lakes, or for meteorologists who have never, worked in and around the Great Lakes, it does take some getting used to. There's a lot of nuances, obviously, to, the Denver area. There's a lot of nuances to New England. But our Great Lakes bring a lot of meteorological nuances, and both of you know that all too well.
Yeah, that's kind of how we get paid, right?
It is how we get paid. And, I had a lot of questions kind of about the lake effect event that we had versus the system that we just had, and how come forecasting seemed a little bit more spot on? How did we get this one, a little more right, if you will, just because lake effect is so localized. So it was a really good opportunity to explain to people how, we did not have the lake enhancement with this last round, which, that throws out a wild card that sometimes we have to deal with. And with the last round that we had, since we did not have that lake effect component, it made the forecast a little bit easier on us here in Chicago.
Yeah, there you go. And there's, so much to be factored into a winter forecast. Anytime you can eliminate one big wild card of the Great Lakes, it certainly helps out for sure. So, of course, that was basically the end of November. And as we look back on the month that was the 11th month of the year, for me here in Milwaukee, it was really off and on, hit and miss. So we had basically 50-50 when you look at the, highs for the month. We had about half the month with above average temperatures and half the month with below average temperatures. We even set a record about 10, 12 days into the month, getting into the, near 70. And then we end the month on this cold stretch and head in December with massive chill, throwing in, of course, the snowstorms along the way. I don't know if it was as up and down, back and forth for you guys, but, let's dig in.
It was definitely back and forth here. We're close enough, Rob, that our weather is oftentimes pretty similar. So the first half of November was very warm, second half very cold, but we still ended up averaging out just a little bit warmer than average by about 1.1 degrees. So not very much warmer than average, but at least a little bit. And because of that, fall as a whole, each and every month was actually coming in warmer than average.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because the highs were higher than the lows were lower. The days that were on the cooler side were only off by a bit, whereas we did set some record highs for high temperatures. So you're right, it did end up being slightly above overall. How did Detroit fare this November?
We were very close to average with temperatures. I mean, within like 0.2 degrees on either side of average for the monthly total. Snow, though, we've had a couple of events, so we're running hot in terms of snowfall. We've had 5.8, so we're a little more than where we should be so early in the season. And I keep reminding people, we're a little under 3 weeks away from the official start of winter. We've been throwing out the winter words for the last couple of weeks, but, it's still fall. And I know there's the climatological fall and then, the calendar fall. But, we're just getting started, and we're off to a cold start these last couple of weeks. And it looks like moving forward, it's going to be very chilly right into the middle part of December. So, once the cold air is in place, of course, we're going to have more snow events.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, the 8 to 14 day temperature trend that I was looking at this morning has our entire region staying below average. That gets us about to the middle of December before we can kind of turn things around. And let me ask you this, guys, because I've had a lot of the same kind of reaction to what's been going on in November, at least the latter half of November, which is, why is everything starting so early this year? And I guess my response to that was, well, I think it's just psychologically early because Thanksgiving was so late. So like we're still thinking that Thanksgiving just ended, but it's already December. B, it's not really that early. We've just been so, treated so lightly by old man winter the last 2 or 3 years. It feels early. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. Certainly looking back to the last couple of years, we've had it so easy that I think a lot of us kind of forgot how soon this stuff can start. But also, we really didn't ease our way into it. I think that's another really big aspect of it.
That's a
It
good
was just
point.
kind of
Yeah.
like we flipped the switch and we went cold and straight to winter, and here we are now. And later this week we're talking about low temperatures that are going to be near zero here in Chicago. We have wind chill temperatures that could potentially be pretty close to 15 to 20 below, which, as we know, we more so talk about that in January and February, not usually the very beginning of December. So we did not ease into this. It's a harder adjustment.
Good point. Good point. Rich, are you getting the same
Come
vibe
on.
over there?
We knew this was coming. We had such a nice fall for a good chunk of it, and I think we suspected that perhaps a switch was going to get thrown. Mother Nature was going to move that switch and bring us the winter stuff. Thankfully we have not had a lot of ice over here. Straight snow events are often easier to deal with than those wintry mix events that we get in the Great Lakes. But it's been pretty cold, and I was cursing. I mean, I was shoveling snow. I got the driveway, and this past Sunday morning, I was shoveling about 4 inches off the driveway, and all my neighbors were out helping, and some of the kids were out helping. But after about 35, 40 minutes, I was worn out.
I was one of those people. I was holly and jolly with all of the snow, but one, I live in a condo, so it's not my problem anymore.
Yeah.
I've got other people that clear the sidewalks in front of the building and whatnot, but I remember the days living in Michigan when it was my problem. I had the driveway, and it changes things when you can just simply enjoy it versus when you have to deal with it.
Yeah, when you're sitting in with a hot cup of cocoa and watching a Hallmark movie or repeats at the Isobar, it's all good, right? But yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rich. And I posted my shoveling of my driveway, which was closer to 8 to 10 inches worth of snow, and I got a lot of weird comments about, oh, come on, you must have a snowblower. My garage is barely big enough for my car. Where's the snowblower going to go? It's certainly not going to take the space of my Harley. So no snowblower here. And B, they were all like, oh, you must have someone do. No, I was raised that if you don't pay someone for something you can do yourself. So yes, I sweated a lot and cursed a lot like you, Rich, but I did get it done myself.
I would make a spot in my kitchen for a snowblower if that was the case.
That's a really good look.
I would make it happen.
I do have a large snowblower because I've actually bought it off the previous owner. That was 25 years ago, and it still runs great. But once I got outside, 2 of my neighbors already had theirs out. So that's a nice thing. When the neighbors have theirs going, there's no reason to get another one, especially when you get 4 inches. Now, if it's 8 inches, then all hands on deck, all snowblowers are in on it. But we didn't really get clobbered this past weekend.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, let's talk a bit about ice because you kind of brought it up in a different way, Rich. But the ice that I want to talk about this time around is the ice that is starting to form out on some of our area lakes. And of course, all 3 of our states are big into winter sports, including ice fishing. We are nowhere near ready for that. Believe me, I'd love to go play some pond hockey today, but it's not going to happen. This thin ice, though, I think could be problematic in the days ahead. Would you agree, Rich? I mean, this cold isn't going to be cold enough.
No way. It's terrible that we do these stories year in and year out about people getting into trouble on the ice. I mean, a lot of the stories have happy endings. The Coast Guard or the Marine divisions of the local sheriff departments will be out there and they make the rescue, and that's great. But it just seems that too often, it doesn't have a good ending. And we'll say it over and over again. You got to be wary of thin ice, early season, even midwinter ice, can sometimes be a touch and go. So, a lot of the people that go on the ice, I mean, they're salty and they get it and they understand the Great Lakes and the ice that forms in many instances. But if you're a rookie, it's not the time to be out there, on the local pond or on the little back bays of the Great Lakes. Big time.
Yeah, give it a few more weeks for sure. Now, Emily, I would imagine, like you, there are quite a few rivers obviously going through Chicago, like Milwaukee. You probably have a similar problem that we have here in Milwaukee, is that folks out partying think that they can go walk on the river.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about that, if you would.
So a lot of times here in the Chicago area, we're not seeing ice on the river until closer to the heart of January into February. But still, I think it's something that we really, really have to spend time talking to our young people about and our kids when you're around water that looks like it's safe to be out on, if it's beginning to ice over. And, I have a 6-year-old at home. Kids are curious, if you're around a pond or an inland lake, even, that it looks like it's safe for them, they don't understand that can't support their weight. So, unfortunately, it is just like Rich was saying, you hear those stories and there's a lot we hear about it every single year, right? But a lot of it is we need to talk to our kids a lot too, to just stay away altogether. But as far as the rivers go here in the Chicago area, we still have a while until we start to see that. And it's taken some of the coldest winters for us to actually see it entirely freeze over in downtown Chicago. So it doesn't always happen. But, we're going to be, if this sticks around and this keeps up, we're well on our way to seeing some ice beginning to form.
Which should make a lot of people happy. I mean, like we've been talking about, the winter sports season, last winter in particular, has really been struggling because we just haven't been able to provide the traditional winter. But I just don't want anybody to try to get a jump start on this, because we're nowhere near, even so, some of the retention ponds in my area look like they'd be great for a little skate or maybe something like that. But you're right, Emily, it's enticing to those curious young minds, but so not even close to being safe. And I think, Rich, you make a really good point. Some of the, ice fisher people who have been out there for decades, I don't worry that much about them. They know what they're getting into. They've done this for a while, but it's always the rookie or somebody who maybe has had one too many adult beverages that decides, oh, you know what, I can go out, and it's just not safe. And you really can't ever call ice safe. You can just call it mitigated, right? I mean, you can mitigate the risk.
Yep.
Yeah, even in the middle of winter, when we get these wind events and it can move the ice, and, we have a big Coast Guard station here in Harrison Township, just north of Detroit and Selfridge National Guard Base. And, they do rescues where people get blown into Lake Erie, this ice splits and off they go. And now they're adrift, and it's a scary thing to think about. So for all outdoorsmen, there's a lot of risks. The hunters, the fishermen, be safe. We want you to be safe. That's why we're bringing this up.
Yeah, we want you to come back and sit down with that cocoa and watch the show, right, Emily?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, come back and sit and watch us from somewhere warm. I was going to mention all of the ice shelves too that we see, developing near the beaches and whatnot. And everyone goes out to explore them because they're really, really cool, right? I would be remiss to say that they're not awesome. But the hard thing in the wintertime is you don't really know where the beach ends and where the water begins, because all of that ice begins to pile up and people think it's fun to climb on. And just like Rich was saying, that's when you get in trouble, because underneath those ice shelves, oftentimes you still have the waves, and that can weaken that ice. And then you fall through and you don't even know it, but you could be in deep water. You're standing over very deep water. So, before we really get into the heart of this season, I think it's already important to start telling those stories and get people aware of how dangerous it can be to be right on these big lakes and climbing on the ice. And you may not even know that you're actually over water sometimes.
Yeah. You kind of lose perspective because you can't really tell where the shore ends and, where the lake begins. You might think you're 10 feet out, but you're 200 feet out, and it makes obviously a huge difference. We had a great story to kind of illustrate this morning. Great because it has a happy ending, but it was out of Minnesota, actually, where a deer was rescued or had to be rescued by the local fire department there. And it wasn't even a huge, 1,000-pound buck. It was just a tiny little one. And, it went through the ice. So if the ice isn't ready to hold up to a tiny little deer, it is certainly not ready for your ice shack and your cooler full of adult beverages. So just just give it a few more weeks and things will settle in. And speaking of, ice fishing and all the other fun winter things to do activity-wise, that leads us to the next obvious question. Where do we like to do them? Let's just go around the horn because we've all got great spots I'm sure that we enjoy come winter season. Rich, why don't we start with you? What's your go-to winter place to hang out in the Detroit or Michigan area?
Well, there are some, small ski hills. I mean, this part of Michigan's pretty flat, but there are some small hills where there is skiing with chairlifts and all of that jazz. Pine Knob is one, and Mount Holly. These are small places. But over the years, I like taking the hike in the state park. Even when there is snow, a few inches of snow, you can still get that beauty being in the woods. So one of my favorite state parks is Proud Lake State Park. It's in Commerce Township. It's about 4,500 acres, not all that big, but there's some very nice trails, and you get out there and you hear the quiet. And that's a good thing, and then I treat myself to a little hot coffee on the way home, either at Dunkin' or Tim Hortons, a little plug there. But then downtown Detroit, there's Campus Martius. There's an outdoor rink. And it's very beautiful. It's very festive with the lights and warming stations. So there's no reason to stay indoors all winter. Get out there and find something to do.
Oh, Rich, you know how to wound me with the Tim Hortons reference.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Canadian
Instantly, I'm thinking of different things.
But
So
yes,
good.
I agree. Emily, where's your go-to?
I'm all over the place. So just like Rich was mentioning, just hearing the quiet and the peacefulness of the woods, you can find me at a good forest preserve. We have a lot of those around the city. Not immediately downtown. You got to go out to the outskirts a little bit more to get to see some of those, but they're just so beautiful and quiet. And, that is something that you don't always get in the city. That's part of the city charm, of course, but, it's nice to get away sometimes as well. And then also we have a lot going on downtown, especially around the holiday times. So we've got ice skating rinks. We've got, just beautiful lights everywhere. This past weekend when we picked up all of that snow, my goodness, you could not keep me inside because everything was so stunning with the snow and the branches full of snow, and people were outside enjoying it. It was really, really beautiful to see.
Oh, very perfect. Yeah, we're getting some great video there of some ice skaters. That's one of my go-to things to do. We have a wonderful downtown rink called Red Arrow Park, which is a great spot. They've got a nice coffee shop, not Tim Hortons, but it's a very nice coffee shop down there, and you can have a little coffee or a cocoa and go for a skate. So that's kind of my city go-to spot, but a little drive either north or actually for me, southwest you can't go wrong with either Lake Geneva to my southwest or Door County to the north. Lake Geneva, wonderful little spot down there. Every year they have a snow sculpting competition, so that's an amazing place to go. And then Door County it's just like this, it's like Hallmark movie came to life. In fact, there's a brand new Christmas movie that just came out this year called A Cherry Pie Christmas, I think, or something, that is set in Door County. And it's like stepping back in time and stepping into, It's a Wonderful Life, the good part of the movie. So yeah, those are kind of the two travel spots that I would point out. But there's just like a million things to do, that you can't do when you are in the summer months, like watch a big old bear roll around like we're checking out at the Brookfield Zoo.
I was just going to say,
that
how
bear
did you
knows
guys
how to
get?
love winter.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you get this video of me? Yeah, so this is at Brookfield Zoo, and as you can see, the animals here locally, we're loving the snowfall as well. This guy looks like he could get up and move a little bit. He looks like he's been sitting there for a while, getting all the snow accumulating on him.
Oh my goodness, that's pretty good stuff. Yeah, so obviously the zoo's another great spot to go to. We have a Milwaukee County Zoo here. I know you've got a great zoo in Detroit as well, Rich. It's it's always fun to watch how the animals react.
It is good. And in fact, the Detroit Zoo, they put on a whole light display, so it's not just the animals in the winter environment, but it's the lights and it's the season and, of course, the treats along the way. So, yeah, it's easy to stay inside and, fester, but make an effort, get outside and take it all in, and think spring. Just think spring.
Exactly. Oh, and I almost left out Candy Cane Lane. We have this whole neighborhood. It's not a organized thing. There's no overly corporate thing going on there. It's a whole neighborhood that all got together to put on all these Christmas lights, and they do take donations for charities and stuff, but it's a wonderful spot if you ever get a chance to tour Candy Cane Lane in the Milwaukee area. Of course, we are going into December when all of these things will be even more exciting because we'll be getting closer and closer to the big holiday season with Hanukkah and Christmas and everything else around the corner. As far as the future goes, weather-wise, as we do our prognosticating a month in advance here, some interesting trends, and I think we've got the maps that we can bring up here to look at both the temperature and the precipitation outlook for the month ahead. And I'm seeing some interesting trends for our area, guys. You want to jump in on this? I guess we'll start precipitation-wise.
Yeah, so precipitation-wise, this not looking so bad. It looks like for the month of December, at least in our area. But, we're still kind of cooler than average the first half. But then precipitation-wise, it's looking like we could be, give or take, near normal in the Chicago area. And that's okay. I think we'll take that for December when it comes to, holiday travel. A lot of people are out and about, flying everywhere, driving everywhere. Less precipitation is a good thing for us.
Right, and make O'Hare run a bit smoother. Now, Rich, Detroit is smack dab in that above average right there.
I see it there, I don't have anything to say. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You know what I mean? If it's going to happen, let it happen. Bring it on. Let's do it. Let's get to it. It's all part of it. This is December.
Yes.
That doesn't surprise me, and no one at home should be surprised either.
Right. And we are talking about being, above the average of the averages. So we could be talking about a tiny little tweak there that may not be all that noticeable. Now, as far as temperatures go, and I think we can bring that map up as well here in a second, we'll be able to see a bit of a different story. We're all on the chilly side, right across Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit. In fact, we're notably on the cooler side of things.
Yeah, we're going to be staying cool here. I know in the Chicago area, at least for the first half of the month, and that it looks like we may be trending a little closer to normal, but still, these next few weeks are going to be very cold, very much below average. And I just want to remind people what average is. So in our area, average highs are still right around 40 degrees. I don't have a 40-degree day in my 7-day forecast anytime soon, nor do I have it in there for next week either. So
yeah.
we're definitely on the cooler side, and it's going to stay that way for a while.
There you go. Yeah, in Milwaukee, we start the month at about 41 for the average high. We ended at around 33. But I think you make a really good point, Emily. These next couple of weeks will kind of, it's like putting your thumb on the scales, as they say, because we're going to be so much below the average for the first 8 to 10 days of December that even if all we do is average out for the rest of the month, it's going to be notably below average for our area. And I guess the same is probably true for Detroit, Rich.
So I look at this map and I say, well, the skiers, the cross-country skiers, the ice fishermen, there's happiness in this graphic. It's not all, and kids and stuck inside. Yeah, get out there. Enjoy. Yeah. Woo!
Rich, you're always a positive force on this show. I love it. If we ever do an episode where Rich is like, that's it, it's all, I'm going to pack up and move.
Right, then we're just done.
Then we know we're in trouble. All right, thank you both so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking out the time here to dig deep, look back and ahead at what's coming our way. We'll meet again in another couple of weeks for yet another episode of the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology.